Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another study series. And today is our first session on Azure Developer Study Series. So I have no other person than the person of Roheem Olayemi. Hello, Roheem. How are you?
Hi, Roland. How you doing?
It's good to have you.
And also, it's nice having you.
How's your
Also,
week been?
it's been the usual way the typical work goes. So it's been hectic trying to navigate the family, job, and the likes.
Oh, okay. So can you give us a brief description of yourself, what you do on a daily basis?
Okay. So, my name is Roheem Olayemi. So I'm a software developer, operations architect, and a DevOps engineer aspiring one also. So I manage customers' applications. Like I'm a freelancer, kind of. So I have discussions with customer. They tell me their requirements regarding the projects they want to embark on. So then I sometimes collaborate with some of my colleagues whenever I'm having difficulties. So, but this is like a typical way I work around my task, which is freelancing as a software developer, a solutions architect, and a DevOps engineer.
Okay, thank you for that short description. So without wasting much of our time, we dive into the session now. So are you ready for us?
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay, the center stage is yours now.
Okay. Is my screen showing so I can start, or I should share my screen? Okay, that's good. So, as we all know, the topic the series is implement Azure App Service web apps. So there are some things we can find there, which is Azure, and Azure is one of the major cloud service providers that we have in the market. So we have Amazon Web Services, we have the Google platform (GCP), and also Microsoft Azure. So the they kind of serve the customers regarding their applications, their databases, and every other thing that has to do with security of perhaps their on-premises and the likes. So that's what Azure is all about. So we are talking about Azure, which is owned by Microsoft, right? So uh, Microsoft Azure has several services that they offer to the customers. So I would kind of split it into three kind. So before we get started into the slide. So we have the infrastructure as a service, we have the platform as a service, and likewise we have software as a service. So infrastructure as a service has to do with where you spin up virtual machines, the servers, where you as a customer you manage the the updates of the operating system, your applications, the databases, right? So the only thing that Microsoft Azure are responsible is the physical infrastructure on the ground and their own host operating system. So as regarding every other thing, your customer's application, your data, so you be the one to manage it, right? So that's the first one. Why the second one is the platform as a service, and that's where our topic of discourse today, which is the Azure App Service, falls in under. So what do you actually do in this part? So we mentioned the fact when we're talking about the infrastructure as a service, so you'll be the one to manage the your guest OS, the security of the data you have on your application, right? So, and every other thing that has to do with configuration of the application, you want to download some things from the internet that would be useful to your application, right? So, but for platform as a service, so Microsoft Azure has taken a bit out of it for you, right? So you don't need to uh, kind of configure some things, right? So Microsoft has actually done some things for you, so you don't need to be the one to configure everything from the ground up. So you just put your applications, and you be the one to manage the application and the data. So Microsoft Azure does not have access to your data. So why the last one, just for a benefit, which is the software as a service. So in this aspect, so for example, we have like the Gmail, we have the Google Drive, we have Dropbox. So what you just do is just every other thing that is in the infrastructure layer has been taken care of by Microsoft Azure, right? So you just manage only your own data. So every other thing has been, you just create an account and that's all, and you start utilizing the the platform. So, but where we are talking about, or the aspect we are focusing on, right, is the Azure App Service, which is under the platform as a service. So let me now start the slides, right? So we have the app service overview. As I said, the app service is a fully managed platform as a service, as I mentioned, for developers. So Microsoft or the Azure has taken full management of this aspect for you. So you don't need to go into configuring some the patches, the OS, and the like. So you just make some settings and you leave that to Microsoft Azure to manage for you. Likewise, so Azure App Service is an HTTP-based service for hosting web applications, REST APIs, and mobile backends. So, as I said, you can develop in your favorite language, be it .NET, .NET Core, Java, Node.js, PHP, and Python. So all of this, because when we interact with applications, right, we interact it based on the through the browser. So you enter your click, go to the browser, www dot, you put the URL, the domain name, and boom, it brings it out. So you are actually interacting, right, from your own self. We are the client with the application via the HTTP based service. So we can also have the HTTPS that has to do with security, but on the an overview on high level. So it's an HTTP based service where we can interact with applications through that medium. Likewise, with app service, you pay for the Azure compute resources you use. The compute resources you use and are determined by the app service plan that you run your apps on. We're going to look at app service plan later on in the slide, so I won't go too deep into it right now. So, but basically, the app service plan is just a kind of an hosting plan, right? Before you can host your applications on the app service, right? So you need to kind of pay an amount of like you need to have an hosting. Let's put it that way. You need to have an hosting that would allow you to host your applications on the app service. So in continuation, so the app service has the power of Microsoft Azure to your application, such as security, right? So the is one of the things that is usually emphasized, right? Whenever you build applications or you deploy applications, whether locally or on-prem or in the cloud. So security is very important. So you don't just deploy the application and that's all, and you leave the you leave like you need to ensure that it's like somebody building a house. You move into the beautiful house and you don't care about whether you have a security man guarding your house to ensure that intruders don't just enter to bug your items or even to assault you in your own house. So you need to ensure that the security that you have your applications are very strong, and that's one of the things that app service provides. Likewise, load balancing. So load balancing is a kind of a feature in app service, which is when the traffic, right, are coming from the client. That is, we're having people trying to have access into your application, right? So the load balancing that app service offers, it it distributes the traffic evenly to the respective servers behind, like within your infrastructure. So it evenly distributes the traffic to those infrastructure, right? So there won't be a kind of an overload on one server over the other. So it's a kind of balances. So that's the name, load balancing. So this is one of another important feature that app service provides. So you don't need to configure or build your own load balancer via a server, because the way we can also ourselves, as a DevOps engineer, a developer, a solutions architect, right? So you can actually configure servers, whether an Nginx server or an Apache server, as a load balancer, right? Where you give it some configurations that it can direct or redirect traffic to the uh, to the exact back-end server that you expect it to go, right? So instead of all these assholes trying to do this yourself, so app service has taken off this burden off you. So you don't need to care. You don't even know which server is the one uh, distributing the load, right? So you don't need to take care about that. Likewise, auto scaling. So auto scaling and load balancer are kind of not the same. No, they're actually different. So, but they are kind of related, right? So, whenever there's a you configure an auto scaling, right? So it ensures that the amount of servers that are required to withstand the traffic that are coming from the outside, like from the internet, trying to have access to the application, right, is the amount that it's actually even. It's, let's say for instance, you've configured, right, like on a minimal level, when the traffic is still minimal, that your application should run on an example, let's say 4 servers, just an example, right? So, but you've now found one of the features of an auto scale is that when this traffic increases, that is the CPU utilization on your servers has kind of passed, it has kind of gone beyond or more than the expected percentage that you've configured on the server. So it should spin up new servers in order to ensure that those the traffic coming from the outside is well taken care of. So meaning that your servers will not be overloaded because of so many traffic. One of the things that app service provides. So additionally, you can take advantage of its DevOps capabilities, such as continuous deployment from Azure DevOps, GitHub, Docker Hub, and other sources, package management, staging environment, custom domain, and TLS certificates. So basically, this aspect has to do with when you deploy, or when you deploy your code to regardless of the source code repository that you're using, whether it's GitHub or Azure DevOps. In Azure DevOps, we have uh, the Azure repos, yeah. So, or GitLab or Bitbucket, regardless. So, wherever you push your code, most especially to be the master on the master branch, right? So, one of the things that app service does is you can automatically, once you push it there, so the configuration that the app service has within itself is that that code would be synced. As you push the code into the repository, it automatically deploys it to the app service. So another configuration that important configuration the app service has within its within itself is what we call the staging area. So although it doesn't come free, it comes with a certain amount of you need to upgrade in order to enable such feature, right? So it's one of important things. So when you deploy the code, so it's not deploying it direct to the production, right? You're not deploying it direct to the production. So it goes to the staging area. So from the staging area, you can now start releasing the traffic gradually after doing several testing, whether load testing, penetration testing, different kind of testing to ensure that your application is ready for your customers. So when everything has passed the necessary testing, then you can now switch to the the production. So these are the things that are very interesting things that app service has within. Moving to the next slide. So why use our app service? So we use app service because it's you can build using multiple languages and frameworks like ASP.NET, ESP.NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, or Python. So as I'm reading this, as I was preparing for this, so I saw something which was very interesting. There's usually debates with developers, although I don't actually kind of listen to this kind of debates, which is they say, okay, PHP is dead. Nobody is using PHP. PHP is not in use. You only use Python, you use JavaScript, and all these new attractive programming languages. So, but as is usually said from those who are seniors in the field, is that you don't really care about this programming language is dead, this one is alive, this one is sick. As long as you are able to get the work done, that's important. And PHP is even one of the language, right? One of the language that upon which WordPress websites sit up upon. So WordPress leverages PHP. So saying PHP is dead is out of it. I don't code in PHP, by the way. So just a point for us. So the important thing for us to take away from this is that it accommodates several languages and frameworks in order for us to build our application. So you don't have any limitation that, oh no, I'm only good in Java. So what offer does App Service provide for me? So you are covered. So likewise, he said managed production environment, App Service automatically patches and maintains the OS and language frameworks for you. Spend time writing great apps and let Azure worry about the platform. So as we've said that when we started the talk, is that Azure App Service, it takes away all the burden off you. So you don't need to care about what uh what are the underlying things to to update or to reconfigure once your application starts running. You don't need to bother about that. What you should be concerned is my application, right? The application and everything that surrounds it in terms of security and the likes. So likewise, containerization and Docker, right? So you can Dockerize your app and host a custom with Windows or Linux container in app service, right? So after in the world of microservices, which is what industry companies are moving into, right? Which is it's kind of so it's an architecture. Microservice architecture is where you separate different aspects of your application into different uh, containers, so to speak. So rather than having them in a single infrastructure, your application, your backend, your uh, what's it called? I can't remember right now. So everything on the database, everything in just one framework, which is a monolithic architecture, which is not encouraged for us to to leverage on because of different events that can happen. So you can app service as you can also deploy a containerized application on app service, right? So we have app I can't remember the name right now. There's a thing container web containers for apps, something like that on Azure App Service on Azure itself. So where you can deploy your containerized applications onto. So why use App Service in continuation? So we have DevOps optimization. You set up continuous integration and deployment with Azure DevOps, GitHub, Bitbucket, Docker Hub, or Azure Container registry. So what they are talking about, I think I mentioned a bit about this previously. So in Azure DevOps or in GitHub, that's in GitHub, right? So you configure, like you link, kind of. That's what it's talking about. So going too deep or going a little bit further, so you have what we call the service principal, service connection. So you need to have this sync, like you kind of you synchronize these platforms, which is Azure DevOps. So when you run your pipeline, so from your, if you're talking about Azure DevOps, so when you run the build pipeline, right, it pushes the code what into it, like it packages the code into artifact, and when you release it, so all of these things can be made automatically, right, without any kind of a manual configuration on your part. So you just do some little configuration. So whenever you push your code to the this respective repositories. So in Azure DevOps, we have the Azure repos, GitHub, Bitbucket, and the like. So all of these things have been covered for you just by using App Service. Likewise, it has what global scale with high availability. So it can either scale up, right, which is when you add more CPU and you add more size to your to the what's it called? Uh, when you add, like when you increase the size of your compute resource. Likewise, you can also scale out, which is you add more virtual machines. So all of these things app service provides for you. So it also says for that you host your apps anywhere in Microsoft's global data center in infrastructure, and the app service SLA promises high availability. So you'll be covered with this. So you don't need to manually go into your server to add more virtual machines when the spike in the traffic has increased, where your customers are trying to have access into your application. Perhaps it's the Black Friday, or you are doing sales, right? So you've now the servers have become so overwhelmed that whenever they go to the URL of your application, it's saying uh, server not found or something, like they can't have access. So you don't need to go into the application trying to increase the compute resource or to add more virtual machines that would assist you in uh, offering your services to your customers. So you don't need it. So app service has taken all of these burden away from you. So let's continue. So app service has a lot of, you can see, we've been mentioning app service. Why are we using apps? It has a lot of benefits. It has a lot of benefits. So in continuation, authentication. Why do we use app service? Authenticate. So authenticate users using the built-in authentication component. So authenticate users with Azure Active Directory, the Google, Facebook, Twitter, or Microsoft account. So when your users are about to log in into the application, so from the configuration that app service has is that you can integrate your the authentication what's it called, authentication means of, like, the way you want to authenticate your users into the platform, whether through Azure Active Directory. So all of these things app service has. So you don't need to start asking question, what if my customers, if my users want to log in into the platform, how do I do that? So you can use it different ways, as we mentioned, as it appears on the slide. So likewise, application templates. So you want to build an application. The time to have your applications running is very tight. No time to start telling your developers to have different deliverables they want to deliver, like having like a sprint. Okay, 2 weeks. So it has to, the application has to start perhaps within 2 3 days, and developers also have other things they are doing which are important. So you can just quickly leverage on the templates that app service as within, which is you can choose from the list of application templates in Azure Marketplace, such as WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal. So these are from the content management system platforms that you can start having applications on. So just create a WordPress application within few minutes, and you start uh, offering your services to your customers. So likewise, Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code integration, right? So these are dedicated tools like this you are able to deploy and debug. So there's a way you link or you synchronize these IDEs, right? Where you code into app service. So you're able to kind of debug whenever perhaps you want to update a particular feature on your website or your application. So you can do that directly from these IDEs, which is Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, where you just make the changes push to app service. Although, as I mentioned earlier, so we have a feature on app service, which is the staging area, which is not free, by the way. So you need to upgrade the particular uh, fee on the platform before you can utilize that feature. Although it's one of the things they offer. So it's something very interesting for developers to leverage on. So moving forward. So with all of this that we've heard, so why do I need to host what do I need to host a web application on Azure App Service? So we've had a lot of things about what Azure App Service has for us to offer. You can build applications within few minutes. You can, regardless of the language you are an expert on, whether it's JavaScript, Java, PHP, Python, regardless of that. So you've seen the power that Azure App Service has to offer to developers, even to a a normal user, right? Because it's very easy to use, right? So how do I start? So the first thing you need to know before you start building or using Azure App Service is that you must have what an app service plan. So what does that mean? So it goes thus an app service always runs in an app service plan, and it defines a set of compute resources for a web app to run. So it's just like you is a requirement, let's put it that way, that before you can host an application, before you can deploy an application, you need to do a certain things. Once you've done those things, then go ahead. So as an example, uh, before you enter university, right? So you need to have some certain requirements. The the WAEC must have the appropriate score for each subject in the WAEC must be high for the course you want to put in for. Likewise, you must have sat for the UTME examination and likewise the post UTME examination. And as long as you have the cut-off mark required, then you'll be in the merit list. So these are the requirements. So once you have this, then go ahead to enter our university. So likewise, those are the things that App Service has within. So you need to configure some things, right? Once you've done those things, then you can go ahead with deploying your application. But as long as you don't have those things, then there's no way you can deploy your application. Likewise, we know that in Azure, without a subscription, right, you cannot do anything. You can't create a resource group. You can't create a virtual machine. You can't create like nothing. So, but as long as you have a subscription, then go ahead and do whatever you want to do. So that's the kind of a similar scenario I believe would make it closer to us to understand. So when you create an app service plan in a certain region, for example, West Europe, a set of compute resources is created for that plan in that region. So whatever apps you put into this app service plan run on these compute resources as defined by your app service plan. So as we just it's just more or less what we've said. So they are kind of compute resources that has to be on ground. As we mentioned that whenever app services from the platform as a service, the is it called it the service cloud service models? Yes, I think the cloud service are models, right? So, so the app service, Azure App Service is under this model, which is the platform as a service. So we mentioned earlier when we started the talk that whenever you create or you want to deploy, you want to utilize the app service, you don't need to disturb yourself about how to update the OS, that is your guest OS, how to download, like how to download some updates, like some patches that your the servers need. All of this will be taken care of, like a kind of an automation, like it's automated within Azure App Service. However, before you can use that Azure App Service, you must have created the app service plan, which whenever you create an app service plan, there are some compute resources. That is, you don't see them. You don't know how to even log in or to SSH into them before you can do those things. So you don't need to care about them. However, those things exist. It's just that talking about serverless, for instance. So serverless does not mean that there are no servers, right? There are servers, but you don't know where those servers are running, and you don't even know how to even log into or SSH into those servers, but they are servers. So kind of similar in these aspects, although they are different. App service is not a serverless form of application. So moving forward, so app service in continuation. So these are the things that would need an app service. So before you can create an app service plan. So before you can create an app service plan, you need to define what the operating system, right? The operating system. So either the Windows or Linux. Likewise, the region in which you want to host your application is very important. So if you have majority of your customers, let's say in Nigeria, and you are hosting your application in the US, so that will be high latency. It's not even encouraged to do that. So there will be high latency before your customers can view content on your application. It's to take longer than expected. So you need to set a region that is closer to where your customers are coming from. Likewise, the number of VM instances. So which are the virtual machines that will be provided whenever you create your app service. So how many virtual machines do you want to be created you when you want to spin up your app service, the application on to run on app service. So you need to mention to state out the amount of virtual machine instances that will be there. Likewise, the size. So the size of the virtual machine, would it be small? Would it be medium? Would it be large? So they all have there are different types of virtual machine instances type. So based on the use case that you that your application requires. So there are some that are compute optimized. They have a lot of processing that goes underneath in your application that you need. So some are storage optimized. You need a lot of storage in your application. Some are memory optimized, and like there are a lot of them like that. So based on the use case that your application requires, then it will determine what kind the number of the virtual machine instances, likewise the size of the virtual machine instances. So likewise, the pricing tier. So as I said earlier, when we're talking about deploying your application to app service, so I mentioned there's a particular feature, which is you don't directly, although you can directly deploy to app service from your repository. There's no harm regarding that if you are learning or if we are testing, we are in the testing stage or in dev, you are still developing, trying to see some things. There's no really harm in that instance. But when you are running on production, it's not encouraged at all. So the feature that app service has within it is you deploy it to a staging area. Deploy to a staging area. So you just need to switch. So and it's not this is the point I'm going to. So it's not available to every customer. So if you're on the pricing tier, we have here free, we have shared, basic, standard, premium. So if you're on the free, I believe you're on the free, shared, and basic. I'm not sure about basic. Yeah, I'm kind of sure about the free and shared. that if you are on this present year, you don't have access, or you don't have that feature would not be, you will not have access to that feature to use. So you need to upgrade to a premium kind of present tier. So that's it required. If you don't, then you can stick to the free tier. So all of these are based on the scenario that your application, the use case that your application needs. So the present tier of an app service plan determines what app service features you get, as we said, and how much you pay for the plan. The present tiers available to your app service plan depend on the operating system selected at creation time. So as we said, every every use case, a scenario, the application for your application, it determines all of this. So there's no one size fits all. That this is the uh, configuration settings. These are the details you need to create an app service. No, all of this has to do with the use case particular to your own application. So every application will be unique, so to speak. So all of these things will determine the amount of virtual machine instances, what pricing tier you chose, and all of that. So all of these things are determined by that. So uh so just see all of these things in action. Although we are meant to do an hands-on, so but based on some interests which has to do with the Azure subscription, which I don't have, I would have loved to show you all of these things in action, so you can appreciate the the awesome nature of the Azure App Service, right? So, however, I'm going to just walk us through on how to do this. This is from their official page on Microsoft Learn. So let me quickly share that so we can just follow through on how to go about deploying an application. So I believe the screen is clear. You can see my screen. So I just want to, there are several things that we can deploy, as we mentioned in the talk. So we can deploy an ASP.NET application, a Node.js application. You can deploy PHP application. You can deploy a Java application, Python application, Ruby, WordPress. It said Go is still on experimental. I think it's still on beta. However, you can deploy different applications based on the the runtime that you are working on. So let me just go over the ASP.NET web app. There are lots we can cover, but the time would not permit us going over everything. So but let's just look at the deploying an ASP.NET web app as a use case. So uh, in the tutorial here, they used Visual Studio to 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 create the application, right? So however, let me uh 1 minute. Okay, see, I will try to generate a just to simulate what just to simulate on how to create a .NET application locally, right? I would not be doing it because I've mentioned that I don't have an Azure subscription. We just want to show us the power of how you can even create like a boilerplate template of an ASP.NET core locally. So let me navigate to uh, so to create a .NET app, we just locally. So I just want us to say how if we were to deploy it to Azure App Service, so how we can do it using an ASP.NET application as a use case. So just write .NET new web app. So it's going to, okay, I don't want to deploy it inside this folder. See if it can- Okay, so test app, let me navigate to test app and create it. So let me do the .NET new web app. So it's going to generate, you can see it has generated. the application. So let me open my Visual Studio Code just to show us the application. Okay, you can see it has deployed this the application under this test app that I created. This directory. So if we were to deploy to an Azure app service, so ordinarily I would have created a repo, I would have added it here to Git add, the Git commit, Git push, all of these things. So when it goes to the what's it called? It goes to the GitHub repository, right? So I'm going to link up us to how we can do that. So let me go to the Azure App uh, Service. Okay. Okay. I hope you can see the. It's not coming up. Okay, let me refresh. So if it's come up, then okay. So let's leave that for now. So when we deploy, let's say we want to deploy that application, we push it to the GitHub repository. So now it's this part I wanted to show us, which is publish your web app. So you just go to set to publish your web app. You must first create and configure a new app service that you can publish your application to. So as part of setting up the app service, you create one a new resource group to contain all of the Azure resources for the service. Likewise, a new hosting plan. So a new hosting plan, that hosting plan was what I talked about, which is the app service plan. So it says where you specify the location, which is the region. Location here is talking about the region. The size, we talk about the virtual machine instance size, that is whether small, medium, or large. And likewise, the features of from the web app server that hosts your application. We talk about the different sizes and the different types of the instances you can create. So after doing this, so you go to you go to the app service. I would have loved to show us here, but I don't know why it's not clicking. I don't understand why. I would have loved to show us as I'm okay. Let me try this. Let's see if it goes. Okay, great. So it has gone. So these are the things we need. So as I said earlier that I don't have an Azure subscription, as you can see. So if it was there, you would have seen it. Let me go back to the previous slide so you can see what would have been there if we had an Azure uh, app service subscription. So it's not displayed here. Oh, look, it's fine. It's fine. So we can just go through a typical way to go over how to deploy an application. So when you want to deploy, you select your subscription here. So after select your subscription, then you create a resource group as it was mentioned here. Then you create a resource group that's can you say a new resource group to contain all of the Azure resources for the service here. So you need to create a resource group and a hosting plan. So you'll see the hosting plan where we'll select that. So after creating a resource group, then you write the application name, that is the app service application that you want to you want to leverage on. So the way you create it is going to have this extension .azurewebsites.net appended to it. You can actually remove that when you pay for your own domain name and the likes, and you host it in your own hosting. All of these things can be done. So we can see here publish publish. So you can select. We mentioned earlier that on Azure Web App you can host your Docker container. You can also host your static web application. So you can do that here also. You can create it within Azure App Service. But let's just go down. So yeah, if we were to create as we're doing, we just select .NET. Although I can, okay, you select .NET here, ESP.NET. Let's say this is what we want to deploy. This, we'll select it. If you remember, we are told that to create an app service, you need to select the operating system. So if you want Windows, you choose Windows. If you want Linux, you click on Linux. So and the Azure app service plan will be dependent on that too. So as you can see, the pricing plans, right? The pricing plan. So this pricing plans is the Azure app service plan we're talking about. That before you can host your web application on Azure, you need to create this plan. This is an app service plan pricing tier determines the location, features, cost, and compute resources associated with your application. So you do that. So you just click on create. So you should create one for you if you are once you are doing that. So this zone redundancy has to do with to ensure that your application would be hosted in more than one zone, right? So you can either enable it or disable it. So it's better for you to have more redundancy. That is, if one zone is down, if you are not able to, if your application is hosted in just one availability zone and it goes down, so your users and your customers will not be able to have access to the application. So it's better to enable it, although uh, everything has to do with the use cases. So you move to the next tab, deployment. So we have different things. We talked about enabling when we're showing the slide that you can integrate GitHub, Azure DevOps, Bitbucket, and the likes. So your Azure App Service. So this is where you do if you want to integrate GitHub Actions. So the GitHub Actions basically is responsible for the continuous integration, continuous deployment of your application. So you can link it, you can configure it in the GitHub Actions. That is when the the code is built and it's deployed. It deploys automatically to the app service. As you can see here, that GitHub Action is an automation framework that can build, test, and deploy your application whenever a new commit is made in your repository. So you don't need to go and manually click a button to host it, your Azure App Service. So once you've integrated and you've configured it, and once there's a new change into usually the master branch or the main branch, as the case may be. So once there's a new change, it should automatically deploy to the app service. So this is it. Yeah, if your code is in GitHub, choose your repository here, right? And we'll add a workflow file to automatically deploy your app to app service. So if your code is not in GitHub, go to deployment center once the web app is created to set up your deployment. So these are the things I've mentioned regarding automatically deploying your application to app service. So if you don't want such feature, you disable it. If you want it, you click on it. So you can see as I click on it, it's telling me to authorize, meaning you need to give that account you have on GitHub that permission to automatically deploy your application to app service. So you click on authorize, it does that for you. Select your organization, your repository, that's the organization on GitHub, your repository, and the branch, right? The branch where your application is hosted is residing, usually the main branch, as we mentioned earlier. Then next, you move to networking. So it's not coming up, probably because of the the Azure the Azure subscription. However, so that's basically so Azure the under the networking is basically trying to have a the architecture, right, to ensure that your application, for instance, is not is not in a public subnet. Just an example. So it's within a private subnet. You configure different security group, network security group, as it's required, right, to ensure that your application is within the network and is safe within that network that the application is residing. So that's one of the things we ought to have seen here. So likewise in monitoring. So monitoring is to just configure when your application receives a particular threshold, be it the computing, be it the memory size is depleting and the like. So you get notified, usually on the Azure application insights and other other tools that Azure offers. So under these tags is just to have labels. When you have labels where you are able to to have where like tagging. So that's what you're talking about. So where you can have like a name. So if you are creating this application and you have the application name as the uh, Azure Community Application, so you can have a tag that name is aside the name of the application. So having it as a tag is usually encouraged. So you have name Azure Nigeria Community. You can write also write created by maybe the department. You can also write you should have the billing number. So whenever you want to filter in under which account is this application running under which department, and you can have several applications like that your company is hosting. So in order to have a proper documentation based on tagging. So you can filter down into all of these things and they are very interesting. So after doing that, you just go to review and create. So after reviewing and create to ensure that all what we have set in this from the basics, deployment, networking, everything is okay. The resource group, the Azure subscription is up to date and the Azure plan service that you chose is up to date, like regarding what you want. So it's able to carry out that responsibility, that requirement. So once it passes, then you just click on review. It's going to create. So you just click on the button of create, and that's that in the application. So if we're able to do that, so this is one of the kind of thing after setting all of these settings, right? So would have had this kind of a display for us. So once we click on create and create, so you find the URL. You find this URL. Let me zoom in so you can see. We have something like this. So in this example we have here. So in this example we have here my first Azure web app dash 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 and this all these numbers. That was the name that was given to the Azure App Service, the web application. So you can see this is the URL. So this is the URL you would find on the Azure web application. That once you give this to your users, once they click on this link, they will have access to your application. So as I said earlier, that this this URL is having Azure within its .NET, and this is not what we want to serve our customers. So we can actually do that ourselves by paying for an hosting, a domain name, right? For that, in order for us to have like a the appropriate name that we want. So this is the kind of interface. This kind of interface. Let me zoom in. Would have so assuming we're able to create as so this kind of interface would have the name of the application. Then we click on it. So when we click on it, you can see the URL here. This URL would select. And on the app service plan that they have within that they chose was this one is the free one, right? So just in the use case they want. So this application insights is where I talk about the issue of you detect and diagnose quality issues in your applications. and help you to understand what your users actually do with it. So you also have Azure Monitor too. It monitors different things. So here is where I was talking about where we have deployment slots. Deployment slot is where we have the staging area where we are able to change from the staging area where we can test different metrics or different use cases like the penetration testing, load testing, different testing like the quality gates and the likes. We can do that on that side. So once everything has passed what the usual thing we want, which is the application is running as we expect it to run, then we now switch. All of this is done within this deployment slot. And don't forget, as I said earlier, that it doesn't come free to all users. So it comes with an extra additional payment to your application to you. So that's so once we are done, as because the fact that we are learning, so it's usually encouraged for us to delete the resource group. Why the resource group? Because the resource group is the container that within it all the dependencies that our application relies on lives in. So like the networking interface, the NIC of the virtual machines, uh, the Azure Service Plan, the Azure Web Application itself, everything resides within the resource group. So the resource group they have created, the name is what my resource group. So once you delete it, so everything has been deleted, right? Everything has been deleted. So that's that regarding this this hands-on. I'll call it a semi-hands-on. We didn't actually do it as a full hands-on. I would have loved to have done it. So, but this is the best I can do. So, in another thing, we can also benefit. So, I don't know if the users have access to links, if we're able to share the link on the platform. So, I hope you can see the screen I'm sharing right now. So, you can also practice you can also practice using this lab. So this lab is provided by Microsoft to learn. So it's so in order to ensure that all what you learn theoretically, going through different concepts in Azure. So in order to ensure that everything comes together in a practical manner. So Microsoft Learn have provided different use cases of hands-on sessions labs that you can use. So this is the first lab for those who want to learn developing solutions for Microsoft Azure, that is AZ204. So you can go through this lab. So it's in the slide I have provided. Perhaps the moderator or the community will provide it to the users. So this very interesting. So it's very interesting. So the lab scenario, what this lab scenario? Say in this lab, you will explore how to create a web application on Azure by using the platform as a service model. As we mentioned, that Azure App Service it falls under the Azure, that is the platform as a service model. So after the web application is created, you will learn how to upload existing web application files by using the Apache Kudu-zip deployment option. You will then view and test the newly deployed web application. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I will encourage us to this is the architecture diagram. And that's something very interesting that before you whenever you get a requirement to build something, you need to try as much as possible to bring everything out in an architecture so you can see it that this is the run through, this is the starting point, this is how the user would navigate the application. So it gives you an overview of what to build, not just okay, this is what you want me to do, start building. So you usually find difficulty when things don't turn out the way you expect it to go. So it's usually good to have an architecture which they've assisted us in looking at the overview in a bigger picture on the application itself. So you can see how the user would navigate it. They upload their images to the blob storage. Of course, the blob storage is residing in the container, the container created for the storage account. So showing how it interacts with the API, the Azure Web Service, and the like. So it's very interesting. So I would encourage us to look into this tutorial, this hands-on, in order to solidify all what we've mentioned previously, in order to solidify it and make it to be solid. So I believe this is where would uh, we call it a day. So I don't know if there are any questions for me on the platform. So to see. Okay, I should share the link. Okay, let me share the link. Sorry, I didn't see that. So let me share the link. Share the link to the lab. Likewise, the other one I mentioned. So I think that's okay. That's all what we have. So I hope it was clearly understood, and we can all see the benefits that Azure App Service has to offer to us when we are hosting our application using different runtime environments, regardless of the language you are good in. Azure Web App Services, it's it accommodates you. And likewise, to go further into this, we're only just talking about the application. So we didn't talk much about the backend, which is the databases. So there are also how you can integrate Azure, your web application, to the SQL databases. Also to make it that whenever you are your users, you add some items into their, maybe their uh, what, depending on the use case that the application provides. So once they add something, so you're able to, it's going to integrate it into the database. All of these things are provided for us by Microsoft Azure. So thank you. I can't seem to hear you, Roland. I think it's breaking. I can't hear you. But I can't
Hello?
see from my own end. Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that. So thank you so much for such a wonderful session. It was quite informative, and I believe the audience have learned one or two things, especially for those that are coming into the Microsoft Azure domain. So it's a nice session. It was very informative and educative. So we wish to have you some other time.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted and honored to have invited me for the talk. So I hope I can also in the future give more help to assist those, most especially to assist those who are just coming up into the Azure platform. So at least we have like a, like an overview, because most of the time I find just reading online, to read Microsoft Learn, like there are lots of documentations to go over, like how are people managing to build things using this Azure. So, but when you have like a physical interaction, somebody talking about it, showing slides and showing the hands-on, that it makes it closer to understand. So I hope I can in future, in nearest future, contribute my little contact to the community, not for the community, to those who are just upcoming in the cloud space, to have a lot of benefits. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
And you too.
Okay, so if you're just joining us, next week we're having another session. So we implore all our community members to keep learning, right? The Microsoft Azure community is there for you if you're just starting your career as a cloud engineer or a DevOps engineer, leveraging on Microsoft and cloud solution. So we have a couple of series that are coming. Tomorrow we have the Linux series. So it's another time for you to learn about open source, how you can use open source tool on Microsoft Cloud Azure. So thank you so much. My name is Joseph Roland, and say bye bye.